it's Donna from Junk Journal Ideas. I loved making this flip out journal cover. It's a topper style. That means you can make it as a separate piece. Then you can add it to any journal you like, whether it's a soft cover or a hard cover. So if you're just starting out, this style might just suit you. You can make it as a 3-layer flip or a 2-layer flip. Depends on whether you glue it flat down onto your cover, or if you put hinges on it, you'll have an extra flip that acts like a tuck spot when the ribbon's tied up. And it's also a cover and a clever closure in one. Let's get started. We're going to start with the front cover first. I'm using a piece of recycled cardboard. It's the back piece of a watercolor paper pad. It would help if you knew the size of your journal first. I've made my text block already, and I'm going to use this sheet of paper here for my cover. And I made this out of a heavyweight book page. So once I've got the heavyweight book page on the front of all my other pages, I can now see what size I want to make my cover. I'm cutting it out at 5 by 7 inches or 128 by 180 millimeters. And you can see how thick this back sheet of cardboard is. I'm going to cover both sides of this sheet. I'm going to use a book page paper on the underside and an Amity Bloom printable on the top side. I'm using a glue stick. You use whatever glue you like. I'm actually leaving a border around the edge so that you don't see the raw edges of the cardboard, because this is going to be a feature on my cover. So if you're a beginner, just add some glue onto the back side of that and fold it over and glue it down. I'm cutting out my top piece. This is going to be the piece that's seen on the front of the cover. Now when I've done my first wrap on the underside, I only covered 3 sides of the cardboard. So now that I've cut my top piece out, I'm going to take care of that raw edge. And I can wrap it around to the other side, and it'll add interest on the bottom side, and I'm left with a patch on the top side that I can now add a different color paper to, which also adds interest. Now I'm doing this deliberately. If you want the same color on both sides, just go ahead and put 1 sheet of paper on the underside and 1 sheet of paper on the top side. Now rounding the corners is optional. My punch won't fit on this cardboard. Otherwise, just make yourself a little template with a piece of paper. I'm just tracing around the template, and then I'm going to hand cut my round corners. Corners all rounded, and we're moving on to the second layer, which will be a hinge layer. And you can turn that into a little notebook style journal. I've pre-made 2 notebooks. This one's a bit big, and this one here is just right. You don't want it to be too big because it'll overpower your base cover. Now for your little notebook, you need to make a cover for it. I'm just using the offcut of cardboard again, and I've made my cover just a little bit bigger than my notebook, and only on the top, bottom and the right hand side. Before we cover it with pretty paper, we need to put a hinge on it. What the hinge will do is make it so we can attach this little notebook to the base, and it's going to be the spine for our little notebook. For the hinge, you'll need to use a cardstock. Don't use paper because it won't be strong enough, because it's going to be on your cover. So this is a Tim Holtz wallpaper, and I'm going to use this offcut piece here. For the size of your hinge, it should be the same height as your notebook cover and approximately 2 inches wide. So once you've got that piece cut, just fold it in half or close to half. Doesn't matter if it's a tiny little bit wider on one side. Just put a finger crease right down the center. This is going to form both our hinge and the spine of our notebook. Now place glue on only one side of your hinge and glue this with the fold facing the edge of your cover. So just glue this in place, and we're going to leave the other side of the hinge free for a moment. We're not going to deal with this just now. The next step, we are going to sew in our little notebook. We're going to use the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. I encourage you to have a go at sewing in your little notebook. If you don't want to sew, you can use a long reach stapler. What I want you to do is put the fold line of your pages in the fold line of your hinge. Get a peg and just peg them all together. Make sure they're pushed right in together. Get your awl and push a hole through the center. This is going to be your first hole of 3. We're doing the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So about 3/4 of an inch down from the top, maybe an inch, however far you like, poke another hole. Then the same distance up from the bottom, poke another hole. Just be careful and make sure you're poking this hole coming straight out on the spine or the fold line of your hinge. Now get your thread. I'm just using the whole 6 strands of an embroidery floss. I'm also using a bookbinder's needle, but you can use any large eye, a strong sewing needle. Starting from the inside of your little journal, just put the needle through, leaving a tail hanging out on the inside, and sew through to the outside. Then from the outside, put your needle back into the inside, leave the center hole and go up to the top hole, and then once you've come out of the outside, you need to come back in that center hole that you've already come through. So when you bring your needle through that hole, pull that first thread out of the road so you don't put your needle through the strands of embroidery floss. Just go in beside it and come out in the center again, and you'll need 1 thread coming on one side of this long stitch and one on the other. Once you've done that, pulling them from the top to the bottom, get them nice and tight. Cut your thread off. Just check it for the tension. Grab those threads again from the top to the bottom, tighten them again, and then tie a double knot. And I'm leaving the threads nice and long on this because I'm going to decorate them with a bead and some little rondelles. Now we can cover up the cardboard. Now I've got this photographic postcard. I don't care for this photo, so I'm going to use the postcard side of it. So that's going to be on the inside of the notebook. So I glue it on and trim it back to fit. Then for the opposite side, I'm going to use some of the Tim Holtz wallpaper. This is just a beautiful paper. I've had this for years, so it is high time I started to use it. So I've glued this on the front, and I'm going to add a piece of neutral linen fabric around the spine. I just think it needed breaking up a little, and I love it. It looks so good. Now to glue it in place, I only want you to glue it on the front part and the back. Do not glue the spine because we need this to be a hinge. So now all that's left to do for this front cover is to round the corners. I'm going to put the closure directly onto the cover. So it's a 2-for-1. My girlfriend is a custom picture framer. So I went and asked her, did she have any of these picture frame hooks? And she said, of course I have. And so did I do a happy dance? Of course I did. Anyhow, this is how I'm going to use them. I'm going to put 2 little brads in the holes, and I really would have liked to have put it like this on the top of the journal. But with everything else I was doing to embellish the front of this cover, I've decided to put it underneath and just have the brads showing. So this is the inside of the journal. I've marked a center line, and I'm just marking where I've got to punch the holes to poke the brads in. I'm using a 1/8 inch Fiskars hole punch, but really I could have just used my pokey tool because the hole only needs to be small enough or big enough to fit the legs of the brads through. Now I'm just going to put the picture frame holder on the inside of the cover. So once those brads are in there and I've split them open, they'll hold this in place. And I just use my jewellery pliers to gently flatten the back of the pins. And I do this careful so I don't damage the front, the dome part of my brad. Now I'm just going to set this on top of the base to have a look at it, and it looks so good. And I'm also going to just put a little bit of vintage photo distress ink around the edges. Now I'm going to, before I glue this onto my base cover, I'm just going to take a tiny little bit off each end of the hinge. And this is just so that when the cover is closed, you don't see these square ends. Now as we go along, it's getting easier and easier. So now we can glue the top flip layer onto the base layer. I'm using the Helma fabric glue. The hinge is the only area that you need to put the glue on. Turn your little booklet over with the glue side facing down and just place it where you want it on your base cover. Once that's where you want it, just straighten it up and then press it down. You want good contact here, so I'm just going to put a couple of pegs on it for a couple of minutes. It won't take long at all, and that'll be in its forever place. Now that dried quickly, and I've gone ahead and put some little beads and rondelles on the end of the thread that I stitched the little pages in the notebook. These are so tiny, I've inserted a picture here for you. I've picked out this beautiful silk ribbon for my tie, and I've put it on now because this is going to help me pick what I want to embellish the front with. You could embellish the front with a doily and a little flower, or you could embellish it with a grungy tag like I've done here. I've just got a tag and I've tore it off the top and I've glued a butterfly and a piece of gauze on it. Or you can do what I'm going to show you how to do today. I'm going to put a hidden paper clip on the cover of the little notebook. I bought these little metal paper clips online, and I put a little paper flower in them and a dome on them. I've got a video on how to do that. I'll put the link below for you. You'll love making them. To make them as a hidden paper clip, you need 2 pieces of cardstock. One for the front and a smaller piece for the back. And this is because when you turn the cover, you'll see a little bit here. The first thing you've got to do is work out how long you want your front piece to be. So you just use your eye, just cut it off to what looks good. Now the little piece for the back, you only need a little bit for the top area, so around about 1.25 inches. It may go 1.5 inches just to make sure. Glue that on and just use a little bit of distress ink if you used it on the rest of your journal. Leave it to dry. Or if you're going to tear this like I am at the top here, leave it to dry. I'm off camera, I left it to dry. And then distress ink that torn edge as well. Hold your cardstock and your paper clip on the front and turn it over just roughly to see where you want the angle to sit. Once you've worked that out, we're now going to mark where the paper clip has got to go to be hidden. So I'm marking either side of the little prongs, and I'm just going to put a pencil mark here so I can just cut a straight line. So with my craft knife, I'm just cutting between those two marks. And this is just a slit in the paper. Rub out the pencil line because you may see it. Now you've got your slit there, get the front of your paper clip and just push this back piece of the paper clip through. And now this is in place, you're ready to glue this part onto the cover of your little notebook. I'm just going to lay it on the front of my cover and lift up the corners and just put some pencil marks there, so that when I put the glue on the back of the paper clip, I know where to place it when I come back. Do not put any glue at the top of your paper clip here on the back. You only want it in the bottom area. Now be reasonably generous around your paper clip. You want this to glue on the front of your cover and stay put, because as you use it over time, you don't want it to come off. I'm using the Helma fabric glue. It stays put. Now because I've put my little dots there as my guides, I can just lay this down straight away without worrying about how much is hanging out over the top and what angle it's on. So this is exactly where I want it. I'm not pressing too hard because I've got a lot of glue behind there and I don't want it to come out everywhere. When you open the front cover, it looks really nice from the back as well as the front. I'm just going to pop a couple of the Tim Holtz, these little film strip photos under here, and they're a bit too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this postcard here. It's also too long. I'm going to cut it off and shorten it, and shorten the photo booth photo as well, and I think they look pretty good on here. This is the journal that I'm going to use to attach the cover to. Now I haven't sewn the pages together yet because I want to show you a couple of things first. To attach this cover onto my journal, I've made this cover using a heavier paper, not just a copy paper. It's a book page, but it's a bit heavier. Now I've also, off camera, made a back cover, the same as I did the base cover for the front, and I covered it, and I'm going to glue it on the back here. Now it's only a partial cover as well, to be in keeping with what I've done on the front. Now with the journal itself, all the pages are paper, but this outer cover is a heavier paper. It's almost a cardstock. So what I've done is I cut the bottom piece off, I flipped it over and I glued it back on, and I got some digitals and I glued them over the top to just give it a little bit more interest and make it more decorative. Now I've done this so that when I glue these partial covers on, it's going to be strong enough to hold them. To make the partial back cover, I covered my piece of cardboard, and then I got an envelope and I tore the flap off and I glued the flap to the back of the cover, and that just dressed it up a little bit. Before I glue it on, I'm going to find the halfway mark and put an eyelet in it. I'm using a crocodile to punch my hole, and I'm using a 3/16 eyelet. So I punch my hole in first, and I'll give you a little tip. I've got a cheat sheet. I keep this beside me all the time because I don't use it enough. So I know that the 3/16 I need the A1 setting, and I need to have my eyelet facing down like this. So I put it in my setter and then I squeeze gently. I'm hardly putting any pressure on this. This tool is so easy to use. And it's set perfectly, and now I can go ahead and glue this in place on my back page. When you glue this down, you got to decide where you want it to be placed. If you want it way out, level with your pages, you would put it right out on the edge. But if you want it shorter than your pages, like I do, you just have it so that it's just a little bit shorter here. And that way, when I put my ribbon in, it's just going to tie around the pages. So that's the back done. Now we're going to flip it over and talk about how we're going to do the front. You can either glue it down like we did the back, or put hinges on it and make it a flip. Because I've decorated the back of my cover, it would be a shame to glue it down, so I'm using hinges. You can get this free printable that I've designed. I've put the link in the description below. And all you do is just cut them out in strips, whichever one you like. I've printed mine on a tea-dyed paper, so it's a little bit thin. I'm going to back it with some Tyvek. This is going to make it a lot stronger for a hinge. I'm going to fold it in half with my print side facing up. I've cut it off so the height is just inside my curved area. I don't want to see the hinge when my cover is closed. I'm putting the glue on one side only, and the fold of the hinge is going right on the edge of my cover on the right hand side here. Now I'm going to add some glue on the opposite side of this hinge and turn the cover right over. It's easier to lay this down on the front of my journal just like this. Now look at my right hand and you'll see where the picture hook is. This is where I'm going to be putting my ribbon in to tie it up. So this latch has to be in the center of the journal pages, not so much the cover. So I'm going to be putting my cover up higher. So when you design your cover, keep this into consideration. I don't mind that mine is up higher because I'm using this area here as a tuck spot. So I'm going to be able to put something behind the cover and it's going to hang out the bottom here. Now, I love the way this flip cover page turned out. So all I've got to do now is add my ribbon on the front and back closure. These closures couldn't be easier. If you're a beginner and you don't want to put the flip pages on, you can just add these directly onto your cover. All you got to do is have a double length of ribbon, form it as a loop in one end, poke that loop through your hole, and then put your loose ends through that loop and pull it through. And then you've got a double strand of ribbon on the front and back. And if you've got a really long ribbon like mine, just tie it into a big loose floppy bow. And if you've got a shorter ribbon, just tie it into a shorter bow. Either way, it's going to look beautiful, but I really do love these double layer bows. I have a few more journal closure ideas to share with you on another video, but for now, I just want to show you through this beautiful journal that I finished with you here today. The journal itself I made using 30 pages. When I folded them in half, that gave me 60 pages. It was quite a thick signature, I used the 5-hole pamphlet stitch. I know I didn't show you how I made it, but I have showed you how to do a fold over style journal using the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Enjoy the rest of the flip through, and I hope you get a chance to have a go at making a journal cover like this one.
Open air, side by side we sway there in all the colors. Summer love, lonesome love, folded on the lawn chair in all the colors. Summer love, remember when we were getting nowhere fast, when the garden won't stop giving back. Honeysuckle, fresh cut grass, I could really use some stuff like that. Talk to me and tell me all that you've seen in all the colors. Summer love, memory, washed in every shade of green in all the colors. Summer love, remember the lazy river day canoe, bathing in the turquoise blue, losing track of time with you. Another peach pie sunset view, sleeping in the afternoon. No place to be and nothing to prove. That's sure something I could use. A cure for the air conditioned